Good morning, Jeevan sir. Good morning, dear participants. We shall start the meeting soon. Our expert is facing some technical difficulties.
Hello. Can somebody please respond? Actually, I am facing some network issue over here. So can someone please respond? Am I able? Are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Nirmal. Yeah. How is it? Are you able to hear me right now?
Yes, we are able to hear you. We are able to see you.
Lab and yeah, yeah. Please.
Okay. Good morning, dear participants. We have reached the last day of our AICT sponsored FDP Geomechanics for Structural Engineers. And this session will be handled by Dr. Jeevan Joseph. Dr. Jeevan Joseph is an alumni of St. Kitts College of Engineering. After completing the BTech from here, he took his post-graduation in geotechnical engineering from NIT Surathkal and then his PhD from IIT Bombay. Currently, Jeevan sir is working as a teaching faculty assistant professor at NIT Trichy. So without much further delay, I invite our very own Jeevan sir to handle this session. Thank you, and over to you, sir.
Thank you, Nirmal. Thanks for introducing me to the crowd. Whether my slide is visible?
No, sir.
How about now?
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. I am extremely sorry for delaying it. It was unintentional. What has happened is actually we had some network issues and the server had been blocked. So that's the reason actually every time I used to log in, I used to come out of it. So thanks for the opportunity. So today I would like to discuss on a few of the aspects or a few of the experiences that I had working with the area of gas transport through a porous media. So Nirmal already has given an introduction to me. So I'm an alumni of St. Kitts. After that, I did my post-graduation from Surathkal NIT and thereafter PhD from IIT Bombay. So currently I am with NIT Trichy. So to proceed with the presentation, am I in my second slide? Civil department.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I hope there won't be any issues hereafter. So here at NIT Trichy, actually, we started the BTech program way back in 1964. Currently, we have 5 PG programs which are running under the department. Of late, actually, we started also the geotechnical engineering program in 2020. So apart from that, we have the MS program as well as the PhD program from 1974. So we do have the TA openings, almost 15 seats per year, as well as the QIP program, as well as the part-time PhD program which is been offered over here. Now, these are the research interests in which I work on these days. One is basically related to the THMC models, thermohydromechanical models, and the response of soils. Apart from that, actually, I also started working in the area of utilization and valorization of industrial byproducts. A couple of my master students are working in this particular domain. And one of my students, actually, she is working on developing sensors for, geotechnical applications, particularly related to shrinkage stress measurements. Actually, the experiments are ongoing as of now. So mostly, actually, we'll be able to get some positive results out of that. So apart from that, actually, I had worked on the area of energy geotechnics, but right now, actually, I am keeping a bit of distance. Because actually a lot of funding is required to proceed the research in this particular area. So maybe, in future, if in case actually I get some funding from some agencies, actually I'll be able to proceed with it. And apart from that, one of my students is working in the area of unsaturated soil mechanics. He's doing his PhD in this particular domain. He's trying to understand the rainwater infiltration in clay soils and how exactly actually we can increase the infiltration capacity with novel methods. And apart from this, actually, I started investing a few of my research theme into the carbon dioxide sequestration technique, which has also been found to be one of the emerging area in which people work on. Now, without wasting much time, I just want to give you a brief introduction about why exactly the gas transport through soil or any porous media is important for us. So when the term comes, actually, the gas transport through any porous media, it is, of course, read along with the permeability aspect of the soil. So as all of us know, the moment actually we try to define the permeability, it is nothing other than the easiness with which any fluid can flow through a porous medium, irrespective of liquids or gases. We always define the permeability in terms of the easiness with which they can flow through a porous medium. Now, if you want to bifurcate it further or to have a closer look, we also have defined a term which is called as a hydraulic conductivity, wherein actually we are particularly defining the flow of liquids rather than fluids. We are just concentrating on the flow of fluids, flow of liquids while we are addressing the hydraulic conductivity term. But in soil mechanics, we have plenty of applications that are related to the determination of hydraulic conductivity. While we are going for the design of liner systems, while we are going for the earthen dam designs, the geosynthetic clay liners, seepage analysis beneath dams. So there are plenty of applications in which we will come across the determination of hydraulic conductivity of porous media. In fact, actually, there are plenty of works that are being conducted in the direction of concrete, pervious concrete, for pavements. So there are plenty of bifurcations in which this particular area has gone to. But very less attention has been given for the gas transport through porous media. Now, similarly, there is another interesting term which would be, I feel that actually it will be pretty important for introducing this particular term, which is called as intrinsic permeability. So as we all define, there is a slight bifurcation, so there is a slight difference between the term hydraulic conductivity as well as permeability. So normally when we denote the term permeability, it is basically a matrix property actually which one has to define, meaning that, so this relationship as you see over here is nothing other than how we are correlating the hydraulic conductivity with the permeability. So please, I would like to just, just bring to your notice that, truly speaking, it's a function of the matrix property or the permeability term or the intrinsic permeability term, which is denoted as small k. It is basically a function of the matrix property. Followed by that, actually, we have the fluid property, wherein actually we take care of the fluid density, acceleration due to gravity, as well as its dynamic viscosity. Now, if you see as a whole, truly speaking, in laboratory conditions, what we normally measure, which is nothing other than the hydraulic conductivity, it is basically a combination, or it's a function which is dependent upon the metrics as well as the fluid character. Now, that is one of the reasons why actually, if you see, the unit for intrinsic permeability is given in meter squares or L square. If you see, the unit which is specified for the permeability, which means that, say for example, if you are taking any metrics, if you are taking any soil metrics from the field, and if you are trying to perform the hydraulic conductivity with water, with oil, with some other fluid, what you will realize is that actually you will be getting different, coefficient of permeability. But at the same time, for a particular porous media, for that particular soil, the intrinsic permeability term is a constant, irrespective of the fluid which is going to get transferred through this particular media that you have taken into account. So that is what actually I just wanted to, explicitly mention to you, that the intrinsic permeability is basically a matrix property which is not going to get changed or not going to get altered, with the type of fluid which is being used. Whereas the hydraulic conductivity term, it is dependent upon the fluid characters also. So that is one of the reasons why actually whenever we are defining the property of any material, so for example, here I have, given a couple of examples starting from gravel, shale, various rocks type as well as soil types. We can define its hydraulic conductivity as well as its intrinsic permeability. Normally, actually, we denote the unit of intrinsic permeability in terms of Darcy. So one Darcy unit is somewhere close to 10 to the power of minus 12 meter square. So the second column that you see over here, it's a constant, because actually it is dependent upon the matrix property alone. Whereas the first term that you see inside this particular column, it is basically dependent upon the matrix property as well as fluid character. So this is actually, we have to bring out the basic difference between, the hydraulic conductivity as well as the intrinsic permeability term. Now, the why exactly it is important for us is that whenever somebody is attempting the gas, whenever somebody is trying to define the gas transport mechanism, so we need to know how exactly we are going to measure it. So it is slightly different from how we measure the hydraulic conductivity in the field, because actually the fluid which is going to flow is basically gases, which we are trying to do in the laboratory. So in the coming slides, I will be also explaining to you how exactly we can measure the gas permeability through a particular matrix. But at the same time, in order to evaluate them, we have the established relationship Kg, which is nothing other than the gas permeability or the intrinsic gas permeability, which is basically Q mu L by delta PA. So here, this is something which is, similar to that of the Darcy's equation that we are using for hydraulic conductivity measurement. But at the same time, here we have to compute the Q value. Q value is nothing other than the discharge. So whenever a gas needs to flow, actually we have to make sure that actually there is a pressure gradient, delta P, which is nothing than the gas inlet pressure. It is nothing other than the dynamic viscosity of the gas which is flowing. L is basically the length of the sample and A is basically the cross-sectional area. So from this, we will be able to get the intrinsic gas permeability of the system. So this is, a derived formula from the Darcy's equation, which is being taken. Now, again, as I have mentioned to you, here also actually we are particularly focusing on the intrinsic permeability, which is nothing other than our, the matrix property, which has to be taken into account. Now, in hydraulic conductivity measurements, we mostly aim on, a constant head test, because actually in conventional terms, in most of our laboratories, we were following the constant or the variable head permeability measurement techniques, in which we used to have a rigid wall through which we will be filling the soil, or maybe the soil which has been brought from the field is transferred to this mold, and we used to perform the permeability test. But one of the biggest disadvantages of this particular methodology is that there will be something which is called as short circuiting, meaning because, as I have clearly told you, permeability is nothing other than the easiness with which any fluid can flow. Always the liquid will, fluid that you have taken for your study, it will try to come through the least resistant path which is offered it. So in most of these cases, it has been noticed that the flow happens mostly through the peripheral sites, meaning the space, the annular space which is available between the soil grain as well as the rigid wall which is present over there. So truly speaking, this effect will be more evident while you are attempting, permeability studies with, low porous media or, lesser pervious systems like clay or silt. Because actually, as we know, the permeability value is pretty small for such materials. In such cases, actually, if you are trying to attempt the permeability determination using a constant head or a variable head method using a rigid wall cell, we can end up in measuring some values which are meaningless. So in order to cover that, so I think most of you must be aware of this particular term called as a flexi-wall permeameter. So this is a particular device actually which will look similar to that of a triaxial cell. So unlike the conventional permeability mold, here we have a system in which we can apply the confining pressures onto the soil sample which has been kept. So this is something, the sample that you prepare is something which is similar to that of our triaxial sample of 38 mm dias as well as 76 mm in height, which is prepared in rubber membranes. Now, at the same time, actually, you can see the connections which have been provided for the fluid transport. Now, the advantage actually that we get is we can apply the confining pressures. At the same time, one of the biggest loophole that we have determined or we have established in conventional permeability is that we won't be able to establish the saturation state. Majority of the time, actually, we assume that the soil is saturated maybe after continuously connecting it with a constant water head, maybe for 3 days or 4 days. It was pretty difficult to make out the saturation state of the sample which is inside. So that is one of the other disadvantage of going for a conventional permeability type. So whereas over here, we can vary the confining pressures. At the same time, actually, we can evaluate how much is the pressure which is the pore water pressures that are getting generated inside the sample, and based on that, actually, we can establish a Kempton's pore pressure parameter B, and we will be able to know how much is the actual saturation state of the sample. So this is one of the advantages that we get while using a flexi-wall permeameter. Now, always please remember that actually we, all the triaxial cells that are available in majority of our labs, it is equipped with measuring the permeability also. So you need not have to purchase any new device, but at least make sure that actually such a trend is been brought, because actually this is whenever you are dealing with some fine grained material, whenever we are dealing with silt or clay, it is always preferable, or if you are doing some work related to research, it's always preferable to measure the permeability value or the hydraulic conductivity value from a flexi-wall permeameter that will allow you the flexibility to measure the saturation state of the sample. At the same time, we can perform the test at different confining pressures. So this is one thing actually which normally people used to make mistake, but at the same time, with the advancement in these particular directions, we can eliminate the chances of error that can likely to happen from conventional permeability measurements. Now, coming back to the discussions that we had, so why exactly actually we need to measure the gas transport? Because actually that is the major content for today's discussion. I will give you a couple of examples why exactly this method is of importance, why gas transport mechanisms in porous media is to be established. So the first and foremost example which I would like to throw in front of you is basically the soil vapor extraction technique. I'm sure that actually you must have come across this particular term which is called as soil vapor extraction. So in this method, so this is one of the remediation technique which has been adopted in the field. So the image which I have portrayed in front, it shows a contaminated soil zone which is beneath. Hello, am I audible to you? Hello, can somebody please respond?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So soil vapor extraction is a widely adopted, a decontamination technique, an in situ decontamination technique. So as you see inside the image, we have a contaminated soil which is at a particular depth beneath the soil. So rather than disturbing the complete system, so what we can plan of is basically having some vapor extraction well. So a vapor extraction well is nothing other than a conventional bore well kind of the diameter of 8 to 10 centimeter in dia. So it will be taken to the location at which possible contamination is being established or contamination is being expected. At the same time, we will be applying vacuum. So we'll be applying vacuum pressure. So what will happen is actually this method is mostly or widely adopted for volatile or semi-volatile contaminants that are present beneath the soil. So while you are applying the vacuum in this particular type of contaminant, because of the, because lowering of its vacuum pressure, what will happen is actually this contaminant change its phase from liquid to gaseous phase, and you can extract it and you can treat this particular vapor in the outside. So apart from this, actually, in this method, you have to have, other sampling or monitoring wells which are near to this contaminated zone in order to ensure that the level of contamination in the particular soil is being brought down. So this particular method is widely adopted for, decontamination of volatile or semi-volatile contaminants like petroleum hydrocarbons, whose boiling point is lesser than 250 degrees Celsius. At the same time, care has to be also given to make sure that its Henry's constant is greater than 100 atmosphere. So then only actually we can make sure that the soil vapor extraction technique, which is applied to a particular problem, is going to be effective or not. Now, proceeding further, the next example which I would like to give you is basically the energy geotechnics. So the initial example which I have given you was related to the soil remediation. Now, how exactly the gas transport mechanism is going to be of importance for the energy geotechnics? Today, actually, I will just give you or take you through, one of the classical ways by which actually we used to proceed for gas extraction beneath the ocean bed. So as you all know, majority of the conventional gases are being extracted beneath the ocean bed at larger depths of the order of 600 to 700 kilometers, 600 meters beneath the seawater level. Now, at the same time, there has also been studies which indicates the presence of something which is called as gas hydrates. So these gas hydrates are nothing other than materials that are similar to that of ice, but at the same time, their properties are completely different from that of ice. In the sense, these are ice-like structures that are created because of the excessive high pressure and low temperature which is present beneath the ocean bed. So what will happen exactly beneath the ocean bed is that once the gas has been generated beneath the ocean bed, this gas will try to migrate upward owing to buoyancy, owing to its lower density. It will try to move upward. But at the same time, there are zones at which, through the cracks or faults, when it is traversing upward, it will reach a particular zone at which a critical pressure and temperature is available in order to get them transformed into these gas hydrate cages. So this is what exactly is happening. So once you have a closely examined why exactly the temperature is lower at the ocean bed is that maybe at the surface of ocean, you can encounter temperatures of the order of 30 degrees Celsius. But sunlight cannot proceed for a larger depth. So maybe at the surface of water, actually, you can encounter even a temperature of the order of 0 to 3 degrees Celsius. But again, what will happen is actually, there is an increase in temperature. It can go up to of the order of greater than 700 degrees Celsius once you are, reaching the zones of, mantle. Now, when these gases are trying to move upward, it will reach a zone in which the temperatures are lower of the order of maybe 3 degrees or 4 degrees, and it will have substantial pressure which is available. So because of this, these gases will get trapped inside the molecules of water, and it will get transformed into the structure which is called as gas hydrate. So how was it discovered? So most of the time, it was found out that the pipelines that were kept for the extraction of gases beneath the seabed, it used to get choked. So whenever actually the conventional rigs, they used to have these pipelines for extracting gases. So while extracting this, when it has been operated for a longer time duration, because of the influence of lower temperatures which is available, the pipelines used to get shocked because of the hydrates that are generated. So the image that you see over here is basically a hydrate formation which has formed inside a pipeline, which was meant for taking conventional gases. So these gases are mostly methane, which are present beneath the ocean bed. Now, when we have a closer look, these gas hydrates, as I have mentioned to you, so the methane molecules that are coming up, it will be surrounded by water molecules. Now, the attraction by which they are being surrounded is not because of any chemical bonds that are getting generated. It is purely based on the van der Waals force, the external high pressure and low temperature, such a cage is being formed. So truly speaking, actually, it is an interaction between the guest, which is nothing other than methane, as well as a host, which is basically the water molecules which are surrounding it. And at the same time, these primarily methane, which is present inside the system, if you want to know about the potential, so it has been found that the amount which is generated or present in hydrate form is almost 10 times of the order of the conventional gases which is available. Now you can just imagine about the potential of methane deposit which is present beneath the ocean bed. It is almost 10 times, which means, we need not have to think about the next century as far as actually, these deposits are concerned. At the same time, if you just quantify the amount of gas which is present, so it has been computed that 1 meter cube of methane gas hydrate, if you are able to extract it, it is able to liberate 164 meter cube of gas. As I have told you, it is under immense pressure. I can just give you the example of a normal carbonic drink like a Pepsi or a cola, in which you have applied excessive pressure of gases inside the system and you have put a cap over the top. So the moment you start opening the lid or the cap, what you can see is actually the gases start escaping. So truly speaking, it's a diluted phase of gas. The gases are present inside the liquid. Now, because of that particular high pressure and lower temperature, it has converted to a form of hydrate. The same way, just if you take a 1 meter cube of hydrate from ocean bed, what you can see when you bring it to a normal temperature or atmospheric pressure condition, it will just expand to 164 m cube of gas as well as 0.8 meter cube of water. So we can think about the potential. Now this is a graph which shows the pressure temperature relationship, which is essential for the hydrate formation. Of course, the temperature is given in Kelvin. So as I have told you, it is not mandatory that the temperature of the liquid has to fall below 0 degrees Celsius. If the pressures are more, you require a very low, the temperature requirements are more or less of the order of 3 degree or 5 degree in order to make sure that the hydrate crystals form. Now, in order to have an understanding about where exactly these gases are generated, most of the time actually they are thermogenic or biogenic in nature. The methane which is generated beneath the ocean bed. It is also been detected that in the offshore regions of KG Basin, the Krishna Godavari Basin, we have huge deposit of methane gas hydrate, and ONGC is trying doing some R&D works for extraction of these gas hydrates, for solving the energy crisis which is faced by the country. Now, the methane which is generated, actually they are biogenic or thermogenic. Thermogenic is nothing other than because of the excessive temperature which is available near the mantle portions. What will happen is actually all the organic deposits that has formed, it will get converted into methane. Similarly, there are microbial colonies that are present beneath the ocean bed, which will be eventually converting the organic waste into, or the organic sediments into, the methane which is generated. So the methane origin can be biogenic as well as thermogenic. Now, at the same time, if somebody is planning to take it out, we have to play with its thermodynamic conditions. We have to either play with the temperature or play with the pressure. Either you have to apply some sort of vacuum so that actually the pressure is being reduced, so that actually it can dissociate in the location, in the in situ condition, so that actually you can think of extracting it. Or the second way of looking at it is, you can think of increasing the temperature. Beneath the ocean bed, you have to think of increasing the temperature so that actually its thermodynamic condition is being altered with. So once you play with these thermodynamic conditions, so once you separate them, again, as I have mentioned to you, it's a play between, how exactly this gas is able to get transported through the sediments which is present beneath. So that's why actually, the gas transport beneath the ocean bed is of significant importance. But there are plenty of geotechnical challenges when you think about going for the extraction. Though it found to be quite charming, because as far as its potential is been concerned, though it appears to be quite charming, there are plenty of challenges actually which one would face. The first and foremost thing is, the procurement of samples. Maybe for experimental studies, actually you can think of taking some hydrates from the location. We can think of pressure core sampling techniques, wherein actually you can maintain the pressure conditions which are present, which is existing in that particular condition. You can think of taking it. But in a larger scale, if you are thinking about extracting it, it is going to be a really big challenge. And apart from that, we are also not aware of the spatial distribution, how exactly these hydrates are present beneath the sediments. As I have told you, there are locations in which actually it will be available in centimeter cube dimensions, whereas there are certain locations at which actually you can find them in meter cube of size. So the distribution of hydrates is very random, not like the conventional gas reserves. So unless we have a deep understanding about, that the way in which actually spatial distribution is happening beneath the ocean bed, its extraction is going to be a big question in front of us. Now, apart from that, actually the simulating its conditions in laboratory is also a challenging task. Simulating all these high pressure conditions, going up to 5 megapascals and maintaining a temperature of the order of 3 degree or 4 degree for creating a hydrate inside the sample in a laboratory situation itself is a very challenging task. At the same time, please remember that actually we are trying to extract something which is existing in a solid phase beneath the sediments. So the moment you are going to play with it, there can be, variations in the shear strength on which actually this rig is going to rust, or else, in the seabed itself, actually we can expect a lot of changes related to its shear strength. Once you extract them or once you dissociate them, more gas is being evolved. What will happen is actually, more air pressures will be generated, more buoyancy will be generated, its shear strength will be reduced, effective stresses will be reduced. So such sort of complications are also expected once you are thinking about the extraction in a commercial level. At the same time, you cannot target on extraction of these gases from all type of sediments. You have to be very clear about the type of sediments we can focus on. In Japanese coast, way back in 2011, in the expedition program which they have conducted, they have found deposits of gas hydrates which are in coarse grain sediments, mostly sandy sediments. Whereas in KG Basin, where we have encountered or where we have determined the presence of hydrates, actually they are remaining in clay sediments. So of course, the gas permeability is of significant importance while we are thinking of its extraction. Because if you are finding hydrates in some clay sediments, its extraction is going to be really, really difficult as compared to a coarse grain soil. So our focus is also trying to get some field in which we'll be able to extract them at the easiest manner. At the same time, there is a significant need for modeling the seafloor stability, because as I have mentioned to you, you are going to change the phase of something which was solid in nature into liquid as well as gas. So we can anticipate, the stability issues in the seafloor while we are going for its commercial extraction. So these are the various, a few of the techniques or few of the aspects which I would like to, discuss with you related to why exactly the gas transport mechanism is pretty important as far as the conventional, energy extraction or gas extraction is being concerned. The next aspect is nothing other than landfills. So this domain, many of you would be aware of already, related to why exactly the gas extraction is of importance. So when we think about landfills, you can think of, these days actually days are gone in which people thought of having, a dump yards. These days actually people go for engineered landfills in which they used to have multi-layer geosynthetic materials which are placed beneath. Apart from that, actually they used to have the compacted clay layers which are, placed beneath of the order of almost 45 centimeters to 2 feet thickness in order to ensure that the leachate that is generated from the landfill is not contaminating the groundwater. At the same time, we have to have multi-layers of geotextile, have provisions for collecting of leachates, have provisions for collection of gases. Now this is where actually this study is of importance for us. Many a times we have to make sure that there are pipe networks which are placed beneath the landfill, not for the collection of the landfill gases that are generated. Of course, actually, please don't get carried away by the image. There are pipe networks which are provided even at the top surface before the cap is being provided. So we will have plenty of pipe networks which are running throughout, a landfill for the collection of methane gases. Now, if the amount of gas which is generated is of, is in enormous quantity, we can think of producing electricity from this. At the same time, if it is not, if the quantity is not surplus enough, actually normally people used to just burn it off. Because if you think about the potential of methane, it's been found that methane is almost 21 to 22 times potential to harm the ozone layer as compared to carbon dioxide. So always people used to burn off methane if they are not produced in surplus quantity, so that actually you can think of getting some value addition from that. So at the same time, actually, we have also the leachate pond which has been created. Now, at the same time, to increase the the methane gas which has been generated from a landfill, so there is a new methodology which has been evolved, which is called as a bioreactor landfill. So unlike the engineered landfill, in a bioreactor landfill, so there is an additional provision of circulating the leachate. So as you see inside the image, so we have a provision for circulating the leachate. So once this circulation of leachate has been ensured, it will accelerate the disintegration process, because as whenever we think about the accelerated disintegration of waste inside a landfill, it requires ambient temperature, pH conditions, water content, as well as the presence of microbes. So while you are having the leachate recirculation, you can check for the quality of leachate which is coming out of it. You can amend the property, you can vary the property, you can add microbial colonies to it if in case actually it is required. And based on that, actually you can keep on recirculating it. The advantage is that there will be a quick disintegration of waste which will be happening. At the same time, the methane production will be also enhanced. So this is another way of looking at this particular issue, or why exactly we needed to go for the gas transport studies. The measurement of gas transport in a landfill is quite complex because of the heterogeneity of the waste which is been dumped. It is unlike the sediments that you have seen or a normal soil which is present. Majority of the times it has been found that the pipelines that have been kept inside the landfill used to get choked because of the wide variety of property or wide range of property which it possesses. So this is one of the biggest challenge which has been faced whenever we are thinking of measuring the gas transport mechanisms or gas permeability. At the same time, the process is much more complex because when you are circulating the leachate, truly speaking, actually we are opposing the movement of gases. Gases owing to its low density, it will try to move upward. But once you are circulating the leachate, we are opposing the movement of gases. So at the same time, actually we have to measure its the coupled flow that is happening inside the landfill when you are taking such case studies for gas transport studies. Now, one more application which I would like to discuss with you is a novel area in which many people are working on these days, which is related to the carbon dioxide sequestration. So this is one of the final applications which I would like to drag your attention. So I mean, if not in India, actually in most of the Western world, actually they have already in practice the carbon dioxide sequestration. So in simple words, the way in which actually they proceed is, how exactly or we can transport or how exactly we can sequestrate, meaning store carbon dioxide beneath Earth's surface. So majority, as we are aware of, there is a huge demand for energy these days. So we are depending mostly on the thermal power plants, from which majority of the time actually we encounter flue gases which are coming out of it, which constitute majority with carbon dioxide. So what has been attempted is this carbon dioxide which has been coming out of these power plants is being injected back inside the earth, into a few kilometers even. Now there are certain aspects actually which we have to take into account. We have to ensure that it is not being leaked. So it is mandatory that actually we have to have some impermeable confining layers to ensure the non-leakage condition of the gas. At the same time, we have to also ensure actually there is no geological fault or fold. These cracks which are present inside the system might lead to the leakage of gases from the system. So there are, of course, actually this area is emerging. So there are plenty of works which have been carried out, but there are successful implementation of these projects also of geological sequestration of carbon dioxide. Now, when you think about this method, people are attempting this method in field as well as in offshore regions, wherein if caprock is available and impervious strata is available, they used to inject the carbon dioxide so that actually eventually they will get converted or get solidified or be a part of the soil as it is. So they are targeting most of the gas reservoirs which are getting depleted. Majority of the oil as well as gas reservoirs, actually it's it has huge holding capacity. So these studies are mostly attempted on locations in which most of the oils or gas reservoirs are getting depleted, and it is mostly preferred in saline formations. And in fact, in coal bed seams also actually people are attempting the sequestration of carbon dioxide. So mostly they are targeting for a depth of close to 1 kilometer. Now its consequences are also quite on the rigorous side. If in case there is leakage, or if in case there is uncontrolled pressurization, because actually all these carbon dioxide is being injected at very high pressures of the order of 600 to 800 kilogram per meter cube, in which actually it is supercritical in nature. So many times we can also anticipate, certain seismic activity, local seismic activity, if the pressures are on the higher side. Now there are various parameters that actually will affect, the success of a geological sequestration technique, like the porosity of the rock, the permeability, the absence of geological formations like fault, as well as the geometry of rock layers. Actually, we cannot think of adopting this method if an impervious strata is present. Until unless actually we have an impervious strata, actually this method can prove out to be a failure. And at the same time, as I have mentioned, I think I have told you once, if at all there is a leak, what will happen is actually it will come out of the surface and goes back to the atmosphere, making the method an utter failure. Similarly, it can also induce seismicity, because actually we are injecting carbon dioxide at very high pressures. So it might result in, if there are weak strata which is present beneath, it might result in the formation of fractures, and localized quake motions can also get induced because of such activity. Now, hereafter, actually, I would like to drag your attention to certain factors that affect the flow of gases. So far, actually, we were discussing. I was just giving you a few of the examples in which it is absolutely essential to measure the gas permeability through porous media. Whereas over here, actually, I want to discuss with you with various factors that are affecting the flow of gases and the various methods by which actually how you can measure the gas transport. Now, in this figure, as you see, this is basically a cross-sectional view of a porous media. Normally, whenever you are having any porous media, you'll be having a transport pores. Transport pores are nothing other than the pores actually which will take part in the fluid conductivity or gas conductivity. At the same time, we can also see dead-end pores. Dead-end pores are the ones actually which are not interconnected to transport pores. Once it reaches that particular location, thereafter actually the flow is not being ascertained. Similarly, there are isolated pores. So these isolated pores are nothing other than the pores that are generated between soil grains where there is no excess of liquid at all. So these are the three ways in which actually you can see the pores in any matrix. Now, there is something which is defined as the critical pore. So critical pore is nothing other than the least diameter which is available. 2R CR is nothing other than the least diameter which is available. Other aspect actually which is of importance for a flow is nothing other than the tortuosity. So a tortuosity, in simple words, it indicates the curvilinear path which is present. As long if the L path is nothing other than the total length which is traversed by a drop of water droplet to come out of the system. If the path length of the water is very, very high, the tortuosity will be also on the higher side. The tortuosity is high, the permeability of the system will be always be questionable. Now, going into the various factors which are affecting the flow of gases, as I have told you, we have the matrix character as well as the fluid character, which will be affecting the flow. So initially, let us target on the fluid character. In fluid characteristics, actually, we have to target on the viscosity of the gas or the fluid that we have taken into account, as well as the density of the fluid which is being considered. Now, when we think about the matrix character, which is contributing towards the intrinsic permeability, we have to think about the grain morphology. Grain morphology in which we have to take into account of the surface roughness, apart from the tortuosity of the the matrix which is being created out of the system, and so and so. Similarly, there is another important parameter which is called as the pore size distribution characteristics. In one of the slides, in the coming slides, actually, I will be demonstrating how exactly we can get the pore size distribution characteristics inside a matrix. So using one method which is called as MIP. So in the coming slide, actually, I'll be explaining more about that. So this is basically an attribute of the matrix. Now, because actually the pore size is independent of the fluid which is going to flow through that. Now, the pore size distribution, normally, in conventional geotechnical engineering, actually, there was, people were keeping away from the pore size distribution because of the non-availability of the devices for measuring them. But these days, actually, people started depending upon MIP techniques for quantifying the size of the pores, the diameter of the pores, and so on. Now, the other aspect is nothing other than the degree of saturation. As you are aware of, there was a time in which people always thought of saturating the sample prior to the determination of hydraulic conductivity. Now, thereafter, actually, people started thinking of doing the experiments in a partially saturated state, because actually majority of the field conditions, the soil fractions are existing in partially saturated state, and there is a completely different wing which is working in unsaturated soil mechanics, wherein already there are plenty of works, fertile enhancing, apart from the Van Genisten models, apart from that, actually we have Rehejo. There are plenty of models actually which are available these days for quantifying the unsaturated flow which is happening inside a porous media. Now, the importance for us is that, just imagine actually we have a porous system in which there are water droplets that are present. So the moment actually if the gas molecules are trying to pass through them, the presence of these water molecules are going to obstruct them. So whenever the gas transport is being considered, the degree of saturation is very critical, because actually the gases will be able to flow only through the pathway which it can avail through it. And finally, of course, the temperature, because actually gases are always being controlled by the temperature at which it is being exposed to. So these are the various factors actually which we have to take into consideration while we are considering the flow of gases. Now, in this particular aspect, actually, I would like to drag your attention towards the method which is called as the mercury intrusion porosimetry, which would be pretty new for many of you. So this method is a sophisticated technique by which you can compute how much is basically the void ratio, the porosity, the diameter of the pores, and so on. So in this, actually, the how we proceed with this, we will take a matrix of soil inside a glass tube. After that, actually, we will be injecting mercury at a particular pressure. We will start injecting at different pressures. Now, what will happen is actually, mercury being a non-emitting fluid, it will start getting splitted up. At lower pressures, actually, it will be entering into the larger pores. So when you apply more and more pressure, when you increment the pressure, these mercury will get split apart and it will start entering into the finer pores. So this non-emitting capacity and the high surface tension capacity of the mercury has been utilized for quantifying the pores that are present. So the simplest explanation or the simplest principle by which actually it works is basically the Washburn equation, 1921, which is given as D is equal to 40 cos alpha by P, wherein D is basically the diameter of the pores. So P is nothing other than the pressure at which we are filling the mercury inside the system, and T is nothing other than the surface tension, and alpha is basically the angle which is generated, the contact angle which is generated between the mercury and the material for which it has been measured. And mostly for soil, it has been found that the alpha is somewhere close to 140. Now, using this particular relationship has been utilized in this particular methodology, in this instrument called MIP. So at lower pressures, what will happen is actually, the mercury will start intruding into larger diameter pores. So once again you start incrementing the pressure, you can see that actually the mercury will split apart, entering into the finer pores. The advantage of this method is that you will be able to quantify, the volume of mercury which has intruded. So I have just given you, one of the, graphical depiction of how exactly it works. So here actually there are 5 samples which have been taken into account. So, of different diameters. So what exactly happens is that when you start operating with the mercury intrusion porosimetry technique, mercury will start intruding from the larger pores. As you see inside the image, starting from 1 or 0.1, slowly the mercury is intruding inside the system. So the volume of mercury can be measured at the inlet. So from that, actually, you will be able to make out how much is the cumulative volume of mercury which has intruded inside the system, from which will be easy for us to quantify, the void ratio or the porosity, because actually we are completely aware of, the incremental increase in volume of mercury inside the pores. So finally, actually, what you can see over here is, in all the 5 different samples, after somewhere around, 0.005 or 0.006, it is becoming asymptotic, meaning that there are no pores that are finer than that particular dimension. Similarly, we can also derive one more graph, which is based on the incremental intrusion of mercury inside the system, del E by del log D. So this particular graph also can be obtained from a mercury intrusion porosimeter. If in case you have any porous media, what you can do is actually you can do this test, and from which actually you'll be able to establish the mean pore diameter. The mean pore diameter is nothing other than actually, in this particular diagram, say for example, S1, it is showing a diameter close to 63 nanometers, which means that the majority of the pores in that particular porous media that you have taken has the pore diameter of the order of 63 nanometers. Similarly, there are other samples which are also being taken, and you can see the distribution of pores are more or less homogeneous. I would say it is something which is called as a monomodal distribution of pores that is reflected from this image. Whereas in most of the clays, in compacted clays and all, many times actually we used to see bimodal distribution of pores, in which actually you used to see two different peaks. But these are basically artificially prepared materials. So in these cases, actually, we normally encounter the pores that are monomodal, meaning that majority of the pores corresponds to a single diameter which has been taken into account. So please, keep in mind, these are gadgets which are available in the market, which can be utilized, in which you can quantify its porosity, void ratio, diameter of the pores, or any sort of pore characterization can be conducted using these particular techniques. Now, this is what actually I wanted to, highlight to you related to the saturation state. Many a times, we will have a system which is partially saturated, and when you have a partially saturated system, replacing the existing fluid with the fluid that is flowing may not be possible. So whenever we are having a gas transport or oil or anything that is going to get transported through a porous media, which is saturated with water, the oil or the gas that is flowing may not be able to get the complete diameter which is available. Though you will be quantifying the porosity of a system using MIP or the best possible tool, the absolute pore throat might be A, as you see inside one of the images. The absolute throat dia might be A, but due to the presence of a layer of water around the soil grains, the hydrocarbon or gases which is trying to flow will only get a reduced diameter of the order of B. So this is how actually the saturation state of a material is influencing the flow of other liquids. That is where actually the relevance of the relative flow of gases through sediments becomes pretty significant. Now hereafter, I'm just giving you a few introduction to a few of the methods which are being developed for measuring the gas permeability in porous media. I'm just taking two examples, one that can be performed under a normal temperature condition, one at a frozen temperature. Okay, so I mean, this is a setup which is called as gas cone, which is being developed for determining the gas permeability in porous media. So as you see over here, you can see the sample. So you can see a loading plunger also along with this. You can prepare samples of varying density. The sample which has been taken, it can be in powder form. You can fill it inside the setup. Using the loading plunger, actually you can apply pressure and prepare samples of varying density. And at the base, you can see there are inlet. There are inlet of gas inlets are being provided. So either we can connect it to a compressor, or say for example, you can connect it to some non-gases for which that study has to be considered. You can use carbon dioxide, nitrogen, normal air, or any gases actually that comes to you for the study. And the outlet actually we have, the outlet connections are that which is available for taking the gas out of it. And unlike in a conventional, hydraulic conductivity measuring device, here the volume of the gas has to be measured. In most of the cases, actually, we can, adopt airflow meters for computing how much is the volume of gas or the Q value, the discharge of gas which is coming out of the system. So this is how actually a normal layout of a, gas permeability setup looks like. Now, apart from this, actually, I just wanted to draw your attention to just, a simple graph in which just to make you realize how exactly the permeability determination will vary. Here in this particular graph, as you see, I have taken 4 different gases. I have air, helium, methane, as well as nitrogen. And if you see, I have correlated it with the normalized void ratio. Normalized void ratio is something which is related to the relative density, something similar to that of relative density. Higher the density, what you can see is actually the kg value is pretty less. Now at loose state, actually you can expect a lower density. Now if you just compute how much ever be the gas permeability which is measured, you can see that the permeability is getting reduced with the increase in density. So more the dense the system is, will have a lower permeability. Now at the same time, we have to be pretty careful in determining the permeability from this. Here what exactly has been seen is the helium, which is having very low viscosity, it has a very high permeability as compared to other gases which have been taken into account. And from these observations, actually, we can also define something which is called as Knudsen number. Knudsen number is nothing other than something which is always been denoted for defining the flow of gases through a system. Normally, a Knudsen number is defined as the ratio of mean free path to the mean diameter of the pores. So for a larger diameters, we can expect the molecular flow of gases, whereas at moderate diameters of the pores that are available, it is a transitional flow. And finally, for extremely lower diameter pores, actually we expect a flow which is called as Knudsen flow. And in a Knudsen flow regime, it has been observed that actually, the discharge is slightly less. The trend is not, becoming asymptotic with the x-axis. We are seeing a slightly increase in discharge. Now this happens because of the tortuosity of the pores. When you go for a very low diameter pores, actually what will happen is actually the pores will become, or the pore distribution inside a system will become more random. So this will reduce, or it will allow the increased flow to happen inside the system. And finally, you can just plot the permeability which is being measured from the device. Actually, you can compare it with the help of the existing models. And this is how actually you can fine tune or calibrate the system that you have generated. Apart from this, I just want to just share one more method by which you can measure the gas permeability in frozen sediments. In the previous case, actually, we were seeing an equipment which can be equipped for measuring the gas permeability under normal temperature conditions. So whereas in frozen sediments also, actually we can think of creating flow devices. So this is something which is similar to that of a flexible permeameter. So we can see the sample which has been placed inside a confining fluid. Normally, actually, we will take methanol or ethanol as a confining fluid because they won't undergo freezing under 0 degree or 5 degrees Celsius. Its freezing point is well below 15 degrees Celsius, minus 15 degrees Celsius. Now, as you see over here, we have the thermocouples that are been attached. We have a temperature probe, for measuring the temperature of the confining fluid, and at the same time, we have the inlet of gas as well as the outlet of gas. So the sample that is, so in this case, we will prepare the sample outside, we will transfer it to a rubber membrane, we will keep it inside a confining, a triaxial cell kind of setup, and we have the provisions for cooling this particular cell, and at the same time, we have the provisions for measuring the temperature of the sample as well as the confining fluid. And finally, you can perform the gas permeability experiments through this sample at different temperature conditions. So most of the cases, what will happen is, if there is presence of moisture that is present inside system, that will undergo phase change. So for example, actually, if it is having a saturation of 20% or 40%, this water will undergo phase transformation. So once it undergo phase transformation, there is an increase in volume. Increase in volume in the sense, actually, the water phase to ice, because the density of ice is close to 0.91 kg per meter cube. So there will be an increment in volume. So it will reduce the pathway which is available for the gas transport to happen. So eventually what will happen is, actually we will be able to see that there will be a reduced gas permeability at lower temperatures. So this is just a graph to show you how exactly the gas permeability is getting reduced at lower temperatures. Once you expose this particular sample for lower temperature for a longer time, you can see that once the phase transformation happens, the permeability value will drop down immediately. Similarly, if you see why exactly it is happening, there is a relationship which has been established for the permeability of gas to the permeability of a frozen soil. So it is always been denoted as a function of its saturation. So what we can see from this image is that the permeability of a normal porous media with its saturation state is completely varying. So truly speaking, otherwise actually it should have been a 45-degree line from this particular graph. I mean, not from this graph, Kg versus KGF. Whereas with the saturation term incorporated in this particular experiment, we can see that actually there is a variation. You can see, at higher degree of saturations, the permeability value is getting reduced, on the higher side. And to conclude, the various aspects of whatever we have discussed so far, the first and foremost thing is, always the easiest way by which actually you can establish the intrinsic permeability of a porous media is by doing gas flow studies. In conventional hydraulic conductivity method, we have to ensure saturation. We have to, have the provisions for applying back pressures. If it is clay and such media, we have to wait for longer time. Whereas, if in order to get the intrinsic permeability of a porous media, you can immediately use gas flow because its saturation can be ensured pretty easily. At the same time, they can go through even the finer pores which are available in such system. So defining the intrinsic permeability using gas flow would be the ideal solution in case of majority of the gases, majority of the porous media. But at the same time, it will be influenced by the saturation state. Because as I have mentioned to you, there will be layers of water which will be surrounding the soil grains, which will be, affecting the flow of gases, the pathway which is available. So that has to be ensured, once you are creating such sample state. Similarly, the setup which is being created, or the setup which I have demonstrated to you, it is a simple setup which can be, utilized even for measuring the unsaturated flow state of gases inside a porous media, as well as the MIP technique which can be adopted for describing the flow phenomena, the flow phenomena which is happening. As I have mentioned to you, always the flow is governed by the type of pores that are generated in such a system. It can be the diameter of the pores, the tortuosity. So there are plenty of factors that affect the flow of gases which is likely to happen. Apart from that, it will change with the type of the gases, because the lambda value, which is nothing other than the mean free path, it is gas dependent. Depending upon the various gases, the lambda value will keep on changing. So the Knudsen regime will keep on changing for different type of gases. So the gas permeability measurements at lower diameter pores has to be evaluated with the type of the gas which you have utilized for the study. Now there are a lot of other areas which can be focused on related to these particular gas transport studies. So first of all, the coupled flow studies. In majority of the cases, actually, we encounter a situation in which two fluids like gas as well as liquid will be flowing through a porous media at the same time. So there is a scope for learning the coupled flow studies in porous media on a matrix. Similarly, we have to also, there are people who are investing, research ideas on how exactly the pore structural alterations or the desaturation that happens in an unsaturated media, how exactly it is varying the gas transport which is happening inside the system. And at the same time, whatever I have discussed to you is basically under normal temperature conditions as well as frozen condition. So, one of my students is also trying to attempt, gas permeability studies on a gas porous media under elevated temperature conditions, because, in nuclear waste repositories, in liner system which has been provided, what exactly is happening is because of the heat which is evolved from this nuclear waste, the desaturation happen. So this is, truly speaking, it's a complex behavior which is undergoing. So we are trying to replicate the same phenomena in a laboratory condition, trying to understand how exactly under elevated condition, how the gas permeability is varying. Because along with the gases that you are using for the study, the vapor phase of water, that will also influence the study. Similarly, the mixture of gases. So far, actually, in our discussions, I have mentioned about pure gases that are being utilized for the measurements. Whereas actually, when we have mixture of gases, because in real time, like in case of a landfill, we will encounter H2S, CO2, CO, plenty of other gases which are formed. And trace gases are also being formed. So in such cases, getting, or measuring the gas permeability will be absolutely necessary rather than on targeting on pure type of gases. So this is in nutshell actually which, this area is heading to. So there is a lot of scope working in this particular domain related to, there are plenty of projects which are being given by ONGC for computing the methane gas transport through sediments. Similarly, there are plenty of projects which are being awarded, which are related to liner designs in landfills. taking care of non-leakage conditions for the liner systems. Similarly, the BRNs, they are also supporting research fundings for liner system designs for deep geological nuclear waste. So there are plenty of various ways into which actually you can think of diverting this particular area, and the investment that you think for measuring these devices are also not so high. That's what I have felt so. So with this, I would like to conclude my presentation. So any queries? I am sure that actually I was rushing because actually I started slightly late, so I had to rush through the slides. So in a nutshell, actually, what I want to convey was, it's not about the conventional conductivity which normally geotechnical engineering heads to. It's all about, there are various fluids that are flowing through the system which has to be evaluated. Depending upon the varying different type of fluid, its transport mechanism also varies. So this is what actually I wanted to convey through my presentation. So I would like to hear from you, how exactly, or whether you are interested in hearing more about this particular topic. I'm more than happy to, share with you whatever I know. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jeevan sir.
Thank you, Jeevan sir.
Thank you.
Participants, you may now interact with our expert. If you have any doubts, you may raise it now, or you can scribble down the chat box also.
Is there anyone who has worked in this particular domain related to gas flow studies, or anyone interested to, or something like that? I think in a Sunday it's a bad idea to ask such a question.
Probably, sir. Sir, I have a question.
One second. Yes. Just, yeah. Yes, please.
Sir, you mentioned about something called a Henry's constant. So what does that refer to?
So, it is a chemical term which has been normally described for wherein we compare the vapor pressure of any gas. So, for example, actually you have some dissolved gases in a particular liquid. Okay. So, Henry's constant defines the partial pressure at which the gas is present in the atmosphere to that in its dissolved phase. So, this is called as a Henry's constant actually that we normally define for any gases.
Okay, sir.
Thank you. Thank you all for.
If any participant has any questions, you can raise it now. Okay, then we shall wind up the session. Thank you, Jeevan sir, for that simple explanation of a complex topic. We're really fortunate to have you. Thank you for spending some time for us. And if any participant want to interact with him personally, I shall provide the email ID of Jeevan sir. You can ask, interact with sir personally. Thank you, Jeevan sir.
Thank you.
Once again.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.